Hello, welcome. My name is JesseMcDesign. Today we're going to be making this nice little fidget toy. Let's get started. Alright, so this week's going to be a pretty simple one, so it'll go together fairly quick once we get going. But we're going to be making what I call a fidget stick, and it's pretty much a fake cigarette that you can just kind of fidget with, or fiddle it around in your mouth and just kind of or whatever you want to do with it. And the way I do that is I take rods of G10 and like micarta type deals, which is basically like different types of plastic, to be just kind of quick with what they are. And then I take basically the same thing but tubes, and I cut them up and I insert the rods in here. They fit pretty much perfectly with a little bit of glue. It goes together really nice. So what we're gonna do is start measuring all our pieces out. We'll get them cut the size, and then we'll come back and start talking about assembly. But basically what we're doing is we're gonna measure out the butt of the cigarette and then the paper portion of the cigarette to 1 inch and 3 inches, so they're about 4 inches in total. There's some finish work that makes them a little bit smaller, but pretty much 4 inches. And how we do that to keep them strong, I learned this last time I did these a few months back, and I sold out of the batch I made, and I've gotten a request for a couple, so I'm gonna make a pretty big batch of this time. And what I do is I use this white, which is basically like the filter, and I insert that through the brown portion, but I make sure it's long enough that it's gonna overlap the seam where these two would connect, right? So this piece is gonna go almost all the way, if that makes sense. And then I'll do basically opposite. I'll cut 3 inches of this and an inch of this, where I'll cut an inch of this and then 3 inches of that. It might be confusing, but it'll make sense once we cut them all up. And then I'll simply insert that little bit in to the rest of this tube, and that won't really make a difference for that. But keeping this portion long is the key in keeping where we butt the tubes together secure, strong, nice and straight, and it's gonna be real nice putting these together. So let's hop on a couple time lapses, mark these up, get them cut the size, and then we'll come back to do some little finish and assembly work before we do our final finish work. So let's get to it. Alright, so we got our baggie of goodies. We got all our pieces cut to shape. Now what we have to do is, this is going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to sand each side to get all the little just burrs and stuff from the bandsaw cutting through, just all the little nasty little edges off of each end of the tubes and the little guys as well. And then we're gonna do basically the same thing for the insides, but it's not quite as important. That's not the most important as the ends. Is we're gonna do a quick scuff on the outsides, just so there's something that the glue can adhere to a little bit nicer, since everything is nice and smooth in these and these as well. We might make a little tube sand and just run it through these tubes really quick as well, just a little bit, just enough to give the glue something more than basically nothing, because these come very nice. You can see on the tubes themselves, they are very shiny finish, and it's basically the same on the inside. So what we're gonna do now is take our pile of goodies and just do all that sanding and prep work, and we'll start just rough piecing all these pieces together, just to make sure we got everything we needed. I did end up having to order more of the white rods, I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly. I miscalculated for whatever reason, but it doesn't really matter because I'm making way more than I need. I'll be able to make, I plan to make 30, but I have enough to make at least 15 right now. So I'll just start, and these will be in, it's been a couple days already, so these should be in today, I think, maybe tomorrow. So again, I'm just gonna continue, and then I'll just have to cut a couple extra of these guys. So let's jump on a time lapse and get all our pieces prepped. Alright, so we got all our pieces ready to go. I'm still waiting on those white pieces like I was talking about, but we're just gonna move on, and I'll finish the rest of these off camera. I have about half of them ready to go. So what we're gonna do next is basically have it mocked up here. We have the, you know, brown tobacco end in the back, and then we have the little white filter end on the filter end. So what we're going to do now is, the last time I did this, I think I used epoxy. I'm gonna try a couple with just super glue and see how that goes, how fast I can cure them if I just hold them together by hand. Because if I do epoxy, it takes a lot longer to cure, and I'd have to figure out some way of, I don't know, taping them all together or something of that nature. So I might just sit here for a few minutes for each of these and just kind of hold each of them together. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do there, but we're going to start off, we're going to do at least one, maybe two, with just like normal super glue here. And I have a little jar with acetone in it, and I have a few Q-tips and like little paper towel pieces, and that's just gonna help if any squeeze out comes out of the middle seam. We can clean that up real quick and hopefully not have to do too much sanding on those portions. So all we'll have to do at the very end, once they're all cured, then we move on to the very last step, is sand each ends flat and then kind of sand them up to a high polish buff amount type deal. And if we keep that middle seam, is really the only thing we have to really worry about, as long as we don't have to worry about trying to sand or scrape away any of the glue, or if we switch to epoxy, that might squeeze up. So let's jump on another time lapse and start getting some of these glued up. So on to the next step. We got our stack of sticks here. What we're going to do now is I'm going to take my little hand sander here. It's going to make things go pretty quickly, but still, you know, I have quite a few, so it's still going to take a little bit of time. But if you can see that there, a little bit sticking out the top. We're gonna knock those down, make the ends nice and flat on all of these, and then once we do that with this coarse grit to make it go fairly quickly, we'll switch to something finer. This is like a 60 or 80, I believe. Then we'll go to like probably like a 220 or something like that, and then we'll go to, or maybe we'll even go up to like a 3, and then we'll go up to like 1,000 or something, and then we'll do some a little bit of sanding by hand on the seams just to make them a little bit smoother. Most of them came out pretty good as I was doing it. You know, I used Jazzeton, like I said, and just try to keep that seam clean as possible. So we shouldn't have to do too much, but I'll do, you know, I'll probably start at like 1,000, and I'll hit that with 1,000 real quick, and then I'll hit the ends with 1,000. Then I'll do like, I don't know, maybe like 2,000 or something, just to bring it up as fine as I can. And then we'll hit them all. We'll switch this over to a buffer, and we'll just hit them all real quick just to get them all nice and shiny and nice and smooth and finished real nice. And then our final thing will be just putting on a light coat of wax. I use like a wood wax, so it's, you know, it's not going to be toxic or anything. It's mostly beeswax, just to keep them nice and shiny and stuff. So let's do this final time lapse, and we'll get some final shots. Alright, so there you have it. Got a pretty big batch of these fidget sticks made. I had someone hit me up for a decent amount. I think it was like 4 or 5 of them. So I figured I'd just knock out a bunch since they're fairly easy to make, and I can just, you know, knock them all out at once. You know, realistically that took me about 2 days worth of work, maybe 2.5. I'm pretty happy with how these came out. I did change a couple things from how I did them before, and it definitely made it go a lot easier and a lot smoother. It made sure that most of the seams came out almost perfect. There was a couple that weren't, they were just slightly, I did my best to smooth them out, but I make those into their own little bundles of like slightly cheaper than a single. So not much to say really, just a fun little fidget toy. Or if you're someone that actually smokes, maybe trying to quit, you can use them as just something to physically get that physical sensation without really having to light up an actual cigarette and smoke, Or if you just like the aesthetic and you just want something nice to fiddle around with. But with all that being said, if you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up, it really helps. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe. I'm always over here doing some sort of creative project, EDC stuff, normally doing paintings and artistic things like that, sometimes furniture, home decor, who knows? Leave in the comments below what I should do next. See you on the next one.